This meeting is now being recorded.
Mike, it's Bob again. If it's okay with you, I'll ask Kirby to start kind of from the north to the south. We'll see who's here and then see who else dials in while we're going through that, if that's all right.
That's great. Thanks, Bob.
Okay, starting in Massachusetts, do we have board members on from Massachusetts? David Pierce?
Here.
Raymond Kane?
Here.
Sarah Peak? Is Sarah Pereira on the call?
No.
From Rhode Island, is Bob Ballou on the call?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Is Dave Borden on the call?
Sorry, why can't you work?
Is Eric Reed on the call?
No one's try it.
Next, from Connecticut, who do we have from Connecticut? Do we have Matt Gates on the call?
Yeah, Kirby, it's Matt. It's Matt.
Is Lance Stewart on the call? Is Representative Craig Minor on the call?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Is Melissa Ziabrone on the call?
That was Matt, 25.
New York, is Jim Gilmore on the call?
Yes, I am.
Want me to do that?
Is Emerson Hasbrook on the call?
I'm here.
Is John McMurray on the call? From New Jersey, is Tom Baum on the call?
Yes, here I am.
Okay. Is Tom Fody on the call?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. And is Adam Nowalski on the call?
Present.
Okay. And then from Delaware so we have John Clark on the call. Is Roy Miller on the line?
Roy's here.
Okay. Is Craig Pugh on the call? No. All right. We have Mike Luisi on the line. Is Rachel Dean on the call? Is Ed O'Brien on the call? Okay. From Potomac River Fisheries Commission, is Martin Gary on the call?
Marty's here, Kirby.
And then from Virginia, I know we have Rob O'Reilly. Is Catherine Davenport on the call? Is Kyle Schick? And then from North Carolina, is Chris Batsavage on the call?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Is Doug Brady on the line?
I'm here.
Okay, great. And then is David Bush on the line?
I am.
Okay. And then U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, is Sherry White on the call? Is Mike Ballard on the call? And then from National Marine Fisheries Service, is John Bullard on the call?
John is not on the call, but I am here. Emily Gilbert.
Okay.
Mike Ruccio as well.
All right. Okay, great. That's it for the board members.
All right, so Mike, it looks like you have you definitely have a quorum, so it's all yours if you want to get started.
Okay, thanks, Bob. I'd like to first, let's call the meeting to order. This is a meeting of the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, Summer Flounder, Scup, and Black Sea Bass Management Board. Today is March 30th, 2017. My name is Mike Luisi, and I am the board chair. I'd like to welcome you all first and thank everybody for taking the time to participate today. I know that a midday webinar is not an ideal time or an ideal setting, I guess, to take up the matter that we have today, but given that the Commission received two different proposals, one by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the other from Rhode Island, proposing alternative state regulations from what was prescribed in Option 5 of Addendum 28, which was finalized back in February, and due to timing of the upcoming fishing seasons and dates of the spring ASMFC meeting, I decided, along with working with Tony and Kirby and Bob, that this was the best way to handle taking up this matter here today, whether or not to approve those proposals. This situation is a little different from how we have considered conservation equivalent in the past. Typically, a state would come out with a proposal that is approved by the TC based on methodologies that are used in calculating a conservation equivalency to the regulations that were either in an addendum or the state's current regulations, which would be equal to that of either a reduction that was needed or a liberalization needed in moving forward for the future year. The situation that we're talking about today, and we're obviously going to spend a lot of time talking about the details, is a little different. The wrinkle in this, in that when we made the decisions we did in approving Addendum 25 as we did, we were left with a little bit, we were a little off as what the reductions that were needed would show on paper versus what the justifications that we discussed in moving forward with that option would be. The justification letter from ASMFC to NOAA Fisheries, in this case, given the conservation equivalency justification that's needed, it's just really not as straightforward as what we've had in the past, and it's a reason why we need to have a considerable discussion about this today. Just to give a simple, quick 30-second background, as you all know, the option that we selected in February, Option 5, on paper does not achieve the required 41% reduction in harvest as a comparison of the MRIP estimates from 2016 relative to the 2017 RHL. I know in working with ASMFC staff over the last few weeks that there's been some considerable effort working with NOAA and ASMFC staff to make the case that conservation equivalency is based on more than just the strict application of past methodologies, and that there's something in addition to that that is being used as a justification. We discussed it at length at the board meeting in February, and in the end, I believe, based on the vote that was taken, the board was willing to accept the risk associated with this approach. And by the risk, I mean, you know, the fact that we weren't achieving the required reductions based on what we selected, that there was a risk, and we discussed it at length, that NOAA Fisheries may not accept the Commission's justification. And if that justification is not accepted, we face restrictions in federal waters that would be the non-preferred coastwide alternatives that the states would have to apply to their state waters as well. So that's where we are today. We have these two proposals we're going to discuss. The proposals are going to be presented, and then we're going to receive a technical committee report on that. And we'll do the best we can, given the webinar and the situation that we're in, to have that conversation. So, lastly, before we get to moving on to agenda item 2, I wanted to let everyone know that given Maryland's interest in the discussion today, and that I was expecting to be the only commissioner on the call from Maryland, I've decided to take the opportunity to step down from chair for this call, and I've asked Bob Beal to chair the meeting. I made this decision in part after receiving some advice from other commissioners, but really I've been giving this some thought for quite a while, and I feel like by stepping down and having Bob run the meeting, and because I'm the only Maryland commissioner on the call, it puts us all from all the different states on level ground, and gives us all equal footing as we debate the issue today. So I hope nobody has a problem with that decision. So with all of that said, I will now, if it's okay with you, Bob, I will turn the chair over to you, and we can move on to agenda item number 2. Thanks, Bob.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Just real quick, I heard at least 3 beeps, new people dialing in before since Kirby called roll. Were there other commissioners that dialed in since we took roll? Or board members? All right, not hearing any. I will assume those were members of the public listening in. Before we jump into the state proposals, I just want you to know in my office it's me, Tina Berger, Tony Kearns, Kirby Roots Murdy, and we have 2 guest appearances, one by Jason McNamee from Rhode Island and Bob Glenn from Massachusetts. Both of those gentlemen were in our office today for a TATOG meeting, so they're sitting in on this end of the call as well. So that's who we have here. With that, I think the course of events will be, I will ask Massachusetts to present their proposal, then ask Rhode Island to present their proposal, then we'll hear from Craig Wojcik of the technical committee report, and then we'll jump into making taking final action on the 2 proposals that are before the board today. So with that, Dr. Pierce, would you? I think you're the one that's going to be presenting the proposal from Massachusetts, if I'm correct.
That's correct, Bob.
Bob, I'm sorry. This is Mike. Before we do that, can we, in order to stick with the agenda, can we just approve the agenda and ask for any public comment for anything?
I'm sorry, Mike. I'm trying to go too fast in your meeting here.
Yeah.
All right. Are there any changes?
My decision here, Bob.
You're still in charge. Are there any changes to the agenda, or is everyone comfortable with the agenda that was circulated before the meeting? All right. Hearing none. Are there any public comments for issues that are not on the agenda today? So other summer flounder, scup, black sea bass issues that are not planned on being talked about throughout the rest of this agenda.
Yeah, just can't get on the webinar.
All right, not hearing any. We'll go ahead and jump into item number 4, and I'll ask Dr. Pierce to go ahead and present the proposal from Massachusetts.
All right, thank you, Bob. And I appreciate the fact that all board members were willing to get on this call and to listen to our specific request, as well as Rhode Island, of course. So much appreciated for that. Sent to ASMSC's office, and I believe it was distributed to everybody, the March 1st document to Bob Beal and Mike Louisi, describing our implementation plan, and in particular what we would like to do. Also sent a PowerPoint presentation, a very brief PowerPoint presentation that, in a sense, takes that memo and boils it all down on very specifics, what we're looking for, and the justification for our specific request. Obviously, no one's going to see this. I don't think you can see it. Everyone has copies. I'm assuming that you can just follow along with me. It's not going to take too long. We'll simply start by saying that in the presentation I provide Table 2, which is in the memo, and this is to provide a context, is what is the size of the Massachusetts recreational summer flounder harvest in terms of number of fish, recent estimates of that harvest, 2014, 15, and 16. 2014, relatively small in terms of numbers, 113,000. 2015, it dropped because of rules, down to 79,000. 2016, about 57,000 fish. So Massachusetts' contribution to the total recreational summer flounder harvest is rather small. Now, we are requesting that the board consider and approve a slight revision to that which we are required to implement for 2017. Obviously, the 1-inch increase to 17 inches, that's on the table, and we're going along with that. We are requesting a 5-fish possession limit instead of the 4-fish possession limit that was adopted by the board at the last meeting. Season would stay the same, 125-day season from May 22nd through September 23rd. And the point that we're making is that in terms of projected harvest, this particular status quo regulation is conservationally equivalent to the Addendum 25 requirements, 17 inches, 4 fish in a 125-day season. It's a 5-fish instead of 4 fish. And as noted, we're requesting that this implementation plan, this slight deviation from what happened at the last commission meeting, be considered, be approved before the ASMSC submits that conservation equivalency letter to NOAA Fisheries. The next slide that I provide is the option 5 slide, just to bring everybody up to date, to remind us as to what's in place up and down the coast and what is going to happen through this addendum. I won't get into the specifics except to say that there are differences as they exist now and as they will be once rules and regulations are implemented in 2017. Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut through Cape May, the New Jersey portion of Delaware Bay, Delaware through Virginia, and North Carolina. There's a lot of inconsistency between the different measures that are going to be adopted this year by region or by state. And the next slide, make the point, repeat, 2016, about 57,000 fish according to the MRIP data. And this estimate continues that declining trend, recreational harvest in Massachusetts. Since we implemented regional management in 2014, 2016 MRIP harvest estimate, well, that estimate in Massachusetts, and this is a very important point, it's based in part on the average catch rate determined from 72 in-person intercepts from the Access Point Angler Intercept Survey in which summer flounder were harvested, and that includes the shore, the private rental vessel, charter boat, party boat intercepts. And I want to highlight that there were 0 intercepts, but the average harvest per angler was in the possession limit of 5. Average value, 1.6 fish harvested per angler. The median value was 1 fish harvested per angler. And non-compliant trips intercepted with 6 and 10 fish harvested. And the next slide provide, I highlight that Table 3, the distribution of the 2016 intercepts by the average number of summer flounder harvested per angler for all those trips. Less than 1 fish, the number of intercepts 10, 1 fish 41, 2 fish 8, 3 fish at 6, 4 fish at 5, 5 fish at 0, 6 and more 2 fish for a total again of the 72 intercepts. So our rationale for this particular request is that one fish bag limit difference, that is, our keeping the same bag limit in 2017 that we had in 2016, will result in the same projected harvest for 2017 and give us the same associated reduction rate as the addendum 25 requirements. It's conservationally equivalent because of the infrequency at which anglers harvested the 5-fish limit in 2016, resulting in 0 5-fish average intercepts. Now, the 1-inch size limit increase for 2017, and this is another important point, it further decreases the likelihood of anglers even harvesting the 5-fish in the coming season. More rationale. The 31% reduction rate associated with these proposed regulations for Massachusetts, it is consistent with the projected coastwide reduction rate of option 5. We'd like you to consider, once again, that Massachusetts harvest in 2016 was just 2.7% of the total coastwide Massachusetts through North Carolina harvest, and that indicates little risk, very little risk, of our implementation plan impacting the coast's ability to achieve that 2017 recreational harvest limit under option 5. Furthermore, this has been discussed by the board at the previous meeting. With the decline in the summer flounder stock, and with, of course, Massachusetts' location in the species range, it's likely that our harvest will continue to decline in 2017 of its own accord. I think that's a particular point that's being made by ASMFC in the letter that's going to be sent to NOAA Fisheries. A note, Massachusetts is the only state within this region of one state. So our implementation plan does not necessitate any coordination with the state to meet that addendum 2025 requirement for all states within a region to implement the same regulations. And yes, indeed, Massachusetts implementing a 5-fish possession limit, not the 4, but the 5, would be inconsistent with the language in the addendum requiring the 4-fish limit and its approach of applying, and this is the text, broad action across all states to reduce the harvest and provide for more coastwide consistency in regulations. However, it's important for me to note that whether Massachusetts' final possession limit for 2017 is 4-fish or 5-fish, we will still have inconsistent regulations with our nearest neighbor, Rhode Island. The minimum size and season lengths for these adjacent states substantially, by 2 inches in 120 days. So there already is a great deal of inconsistency. I know we're attempting to get more consistency, but still there will be a lot of inconsistency once everyone implements what needs to be done in 2017. So, slightly higher possession limit for Massachusetts will do little to erode the consistency achieved through the addendum. Obviously, I've been very sensitive to this particular. I know all other states are sensitive to this as well, so I paid special attention to this. So that brings me to the last slide in this brief presentation, and it's just to highlight the fact that the addendum 28 requirements, 17 inches for fish, May 22nd through September 23rd for Massachusetts, that's the 125 days. The projected harvest is about 39,083 fish, and what I'm suggesting and urging is support for that continuation of the 5-fish possession limit, which results in the same season. That's still what we're proposing, not to change that, and the projected harvest would still be 39,083 fish. So we're conservationally equivalent. We're putting in another for conservation neutral, and we have concluded that keeping the same bag will pose no risk for the 2017 recreational harvest limit being exceeded. We don't consider our request to be an alternative option or alternative, not at all. It's basically the same. It's equivalent. So I'll stop there and turn back to you, Bob.
Thank you, David. Are there any specific questions from the board members on the Massachusetts proposal for David?
Rob O'Reilly here with 2 questions.
Go ahead, Rob.
And, thank you, Bob, and thank you for the presentation, David. And I guess it was interesting to see the precision improve each year since 2014 when the regional approach started. And so that was one good thing to see. What I don't know is how the person intercepts have been on those 3 years, because 72 seems like a lot for the amount of harvest that Massachusetts had. And I was just wondering, has that changed or increased each time since 2014? So that's one question. And related to that, based on the lack of that 5th fish and the expectation that there, with the size limit increase, that there wouldn't be many who would attain that 5th fish, I was wondering if I can also follow up with the technical committee, Bob, on exactly when the 4 fish was set, which data set was used to indicate that there would be a drop to 4 fish to begin with. So the first question, I think, is specific to the proposal, and I'm asking about the intercepts, how they've changed in the last 3 years, well, at least from 14 to 16. The second question is, what were the data that were used that indicated that there should be a drop in the bag limit? Because when I look at this overall, I'm thinking from the beginning when this started, when option 5 started, that the main situation was the increase in the size limit by 1 inch. That conforms with the Massachusetts proposal. The bag limit or possession limit does not. So I guess I need to know a little bit more about that. And I guess the last part, come back because I want to move aside and let others have their chance. The last part is for the for-hire fleet, are there any indications of, the attainment of more fish than 4 that come in through the VTRs or anything like that? And I don't know. I'm just asking. So thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you, Rob.
Thanks, Rob. Let me see. Oh, go ahead, David. If you can answer those, that'd be great.
Yeah, I wanted to point out that I've got Dan McKiernan with me. He's listening in. And, of course, Bob Glenn, you noted, Bob is with you in the ASMC office, and Bob's on the technical committee, so he may have a better handle on the amount of sampling that's been done through the MREP in Massachusetts. I can simply say that we have continued to put a lot of effort into MREP. We've added a lot of additional state resources into the MREP to sample more and more, to do more and more intercepts in order to increase the precision of our estimates. Bob, did you happen to have anything else to add regarding that?
I don't have a specific number of intercepts by year in front of me right now, David. So I don't have. I can't give an exact number, but I can reaffirm what you indicated, that we've invested quite a bit of resources in trying to enhance our amount of MRIP sampling in the last 5 years. But that's something I fairly quickly and did distribute, if that's
okay, yeah, thank you.
Board,
regarding you mentioned, Rob, the 17 inches. Going up on the minimum size, we're confident it's going to have another rather significant impact on the amount of take of summer flounder by recreational fishermen, especially by the shore fishermen, private fishermen. And I think everybody appreciates this. It's probably the same up and down the coast. And when we increase the bag, it tends to reduce the availability of summer flounder. They tend to be smaller on the shore. So they're just not caught or they're released. So that's one reason why the 17 inches is going to have, we suspect, another big impact on the take in the landings of summer flounder by recreational fishermen. And for higher take, well, one thing that I've learned from talking with the recreational fishing community in Massachusetts, certainly the for hire guys that are very attentive to what goes on with ASMFC regulations impacting the for hire fishermen, is that we seem to be losing more and more for hire operators as the possession limits get lower, as the minimum sizes get higher, as the seasons get changed. That's one of the reasons why I'm looking for. That's one of the reasons why I'm making this request, in order to deal as best I can with the continued dwindling of our for-hire recreational fishermen, which is important to this state, important to every state, but clearly in Massachusetts it is, and we're losing the numbers, not just for hire black fluke, but for hire black sea bass. I spent all morning, for example, talking to a black sea bass for hire fishermen concerned about what's coming down the road for them, fluke to some extent as well. So again, the 17 inches had a dramatic impact. The participation in the for hire fishery is dwindling because guys are just dropping out of it, or moving to other states because they have few options other than that.
All right, thanks, David.
Bob.
Rob, I think you had a second question on the data set used for to go from to come up with the 4 fish originally.
Right. My question, I guess, is to Greg Wojcik, perhaps, but the question is the data that were used to indicate that a drop in the bag limit in certain areas, that would be something to know about it, because I'm not sure of all the details on which data were used and whether Massachusetts had data or whether this was something that was not factored in. So, and I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
Greg, you on the line? Can you help with that?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I can answer that. So the data that we had used to come up with the 4 fish was the same data that Massachusetts had used, but we had used it for all of the states. We had originally checked to see what a reduction would be to have an increase by 1 inch by all states. We were hoping to get to that 30% mark. That didn't quite reach it. So there was sort of a drop in the creel limit to some more consistent possession limits across states, and that's sort of how we got to that 4 fish.
Thanks, Greg. Are there any other questions for Dr. Pierce on the Massachusetts proposal?
Hey, Bob.
All right, here. Yeah.
Hello. Hello.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Emerson. I've got a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
I'm wondering, in terms of the intercept data for 2014 and 2015, how many intercepts there were where people did, in fact, catch 5 fish? One question. And the second question is, reading through Massachusetts' proposal, they're saying that they don't anticipate anybody's going to catch 5 fish. However, the 5 fish limit provides an important benefit to for-hire vessels as a marketing tool. And I'm guessing that's marketing to attract customers both from within Massachusetts and other states. Would that be correct? Those are 2 questions.
Well, I think it's more in-state now, Emerson, as other states increase their bags and make their recreational fishery more liberal. As I've been told by the for-hire fleet in Massachusetts, there's less interest coming to Massachusetts to take advantage of fish in our waters. There's not much advantage to it. So that's what I've been told, and of course it's of concern, but hey, it is what it is. Primarily, I suspect it's just people that are relatively nearby, certainly Massachusetts residents, maybe tourists as well, just taking advantage of what may be out there and living within the rules. And by the way, I wanted to point out something else, and this is something that may be relevant to all states, and it's specific to the MRIP work. I'm just wondering if it's possible that when interviewers in the different states interview fishermen who are fishing hook and line, but commercially, will they claim that they're recreational? If the recreational limits happen to be favorable to them versus what the commercial limits may be, specific to hook and line guys. This is something that is becoming more and more of a concern to me and to my staff. And I just wonder if it's a concern that might be shared by other states, or if it's something the technical committee should look into not necessarily right now, but certainly as we move forward. And when do we run the risk of actual commercial data being called recreational catch because commercial guys fishing from shore or from small boats, let's say, and having higher amounts, they bring it ashore, they call it recreational take. I just wanted to make that point, for food for thought as we go down the road, specific to our using MRIP information and, of course, improving the way we use it.
Thanks, David.
I asked another question that has not been addressed. I can repeat it.
Yes,
and that was in Table 3 that Massachusetts presents for the intercepts. There were 0 intercepts where people caught 5 fish. I'm wondering what the data shows for 2015 and 2014 in terms of how many intercepts were there where people caught 5 fish.
I'd have to look that up, Emerson. I don't have that handy. No, I don't have it handy. Sorry, I can't answer that question right away, Emerson.
Other questions? Well, from the group before we go into the Rhode Island proposal.
Hey, Bob, John Clark, just kind of following up about the non-compliant data for 2016. I can understand, David, not using those non-compliant ones if you were talking about reducing your bag, but you're actually consuming and not reducing. What was the rationale for not considering those 2 intercepts where you had more than 5 fish caught?
It didn't seem sensible or appropriate to look at non-compliant fish. I mean, we obviously... It's poaching. So everyone has poaching. We do what we can to deal with poaching. Every state tries to do that. We have...
yeah, but these were obviously anglers that consented to a interview from an APIS interviewer, correct? I mean, if they knew they were poaching, you would think they would be a little more discreet than to say, yeah, sure, go ahead, look at my catch. I'm just wondering, it seems a little odd that this came up in your actual interviews, that somebody opened up their cooler and showed them 10 fish that they caught.
Well, never know. Anglers may make mistakes.
Right, but the point is just that if you're not, obviously you can't get credit for these non-compliant things when you're trying to estimate how much you're saving by reducing your possession, but the fact is you're not reducing here, you're actually remaining the same, so I'm just wondering what the rationale was for not including that.
Only that we consider it to be poaching, so it didn't make sense to include it.
Right, but it would also show that 5 fish is not the same as 4 fish. Wouldn't it? I mean, it would probably end up making them a little bit different.
I don't think so, no. Our arguments still hold up. I mean, the 5 fish is the same as the 4 fish, especially in the context of the amount of recreational take that we have in Massachusetts. Again, it's relatively minor. We're small players. In this particular case, small fish in a big pond. Recreational harvest is minimal compared to what's happening in other states, be it New York, New Jersey, or some of the other states. Of course, New York and New Jersey are the big players, which makes sense considering the amount of effort that occurs out of New York and, of course, the availability of fluke.
Thanks.
All right. In the interest of time, are there other questions, or should we everybody comfortable moving into asking Bob Ballou to present Rhode Island's proposal?
Well, this is Tom Fody. I'd like to say,
can I ask one brief question?
All right. We'll have Tom Fody, and then I'm not sure who the second person was, and then we'll go into Rhode Island's proposal. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah. When we look at people catching bag limits on any species, and we look at the percentage of people that do that, is very small. But how it affects tourism from going from one state, what was the big battle into putting in regions between New York and New Jersey is because we had a smaller size limit, we had a different bag limit, and that affects where people go to fish, so it affects the economy. The same thing went on for Delaware and New Jersey. So we all supposed to be for fish along the coast, and that's what Massachusetts and Rhode Island voted for. I don't see the big objection at this point in time. The other thing I wanted to point out to Dave is that our commercial hook and line fishery is like, I think about 9 permits. I might be off. Tom could probably fill in. It's maybe 10 permits that are left that do that. And they have greater availability of fish since they fish on the commercial size limit, which is only 14 inches, and they don't have a bag limit. They have a poundage requirement. So that's not a problem in New Jersey, and I don't think any state that has that type of permitting has a problem with that. So I'd just like you to point that out.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. There was also another person that tried to chime in with a question right before, as Tom was speaking. Who was that?
That's David Bush, North Carolina. Just briefly, I understand that he had mentioned, Dave, earlier that, you know, it sounds like participation is dwindling and whatnot. Now, granted, we never really know the future, but changes in the economy, a light winter for some of us and things of that nature. Do you all have any sort of backup if you start getting MRIP predictions that you're going to have an overage? What would be the resulting efforts to try to curb that?
Well, our season is really small. It's only 125 days. So by the time the MRIP information comes in, I suspect the season would have been just about over and done with. But once again, I don't expect there to be any unanticipated and any surprises regarding what the total take will be, because we've been dwindling one year, then the next year, then the next year. And you know, with the status of the stock, not the way we thought it was going to be, but I would be very surprised if there was not expected and unanticipated increase in recreational take. We're only 125 days. You know, of course, that contrasts with some of the other states. Some states are close. Let's see, Connecticut through New Jersey, 128. I think North Carolina is 365. So yeah, there's a wide range of availability of days for fishing elsewhere. But for us, it's very restricted.
Thanks, David and David. With that, I'll go ahead and ask Bob Ballou to go ahead and present the Rhode Island proposal if you're ready to do that, Bob.
I am ready, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we do not have a PowerPoint, so I would just ask everybody as I offer some brief remarks to just close your eyes and picture yourself on a warm summer day on Narragansett Bay. First, on behalf of the entire Rhode Island delegation, we want to thank the board, chair, ASMFC staff, the technical committee, and of course all the board members for taking the time to consider our proposal. We are acutely aware of the many challenges facing the fishery, and we look forward to our ongoing collaboration with the board to address those challenges. Rhode Island proposes board consideration and approval of a conservation equivalency proposal as set forth in our memo to the board, involving a 19-inch minimum size, a 6-fish possession limit, and a 227-day season running from May 19 through December 31. The proposal differs from the measures set forth in the addendum with regard to the bag, that is 6 fish instead of 4, compensated for by proposing a reduction in our season, that is 227 days with a May 19th opening instead of 245 days with a May 1 opening. With regard to our proposal, we trust the board has reviewed our memo, and I certainly won't take the time to rehash all the points set forth in that memo. Rather, I just want to briefly summarize 2 key points that are the crux of the board's review as we see it. Point 1 is that Rhode Island's proposal clearly constitutes a valid, well-supported, and viable application of conservation equivalency, which has long been an integral part of the Commission's management process, including the summer flounder FMP. The key standard for conservation equivalency, as set forth in the Commission's CE guidance document, is that alternative management approaches may be proposed and, upon board approval, enacted by a state, provided, and I quote, that the action achieves the same quantified level of conservation for the resource as the measures set forth in the FMP, which in this case is Addendum 28. We submit that Rhode Island's proposal not only meets that standard, but exceeds it, as confirmed by the technical committee in its memo to the board. The analysis on paper is straightforward. The measures set forth in the addendum would result in an overall reduction in projected harvest for Rhode Island in 2017 of 34%, which happens to be the highest percent reduction of any state or region along the entire coast. Rhode Island's CE proposal would increase that projected harvest reduction to 38%, thus constituting a more conservative approach and further elevating our status as the state/region enacting the largest overall percent reduction in harvest. So without question, Rhode Island's proposal meets the standard for conservation equivalency and thus warrants approval. The second key point that's clearly of critical importance to the board is that Rhode Island's proposal not only is consistent with Addendum 28, but also helps to strengthen the rationale for its approval by GARFO. We note that the technical committee examined this issue of consistency, but was unable to reach a consensus opinion on it. So what does the addendum say in terms of its approach to achieving significant and meaningful harvest reductions to meet the 2017 RHL? The relevant language is set forth in the last paragraph on page 8 of the addendum. In fact, it really boils down to the last sentence in that paragraph, which reads, and I quote, "The approach thus applies broad action across all states to reduce harvest and provide for more coastwide consistency in regulations." In terms of broad action, the Rhode Island proposal, in fact, involves broader action than any other state or region in that reductions would be enacted for minimum size and for bag and for season. No other state or region is proposing to enact such broad actions, nor obligated to do so under the addendum. In terms of reduced harvest, as already noted, Rhode Island's proposal would reduce projected harvest above and beyond the level established by the addendum. And finally, with regard to more coastwide consistency in regulations, Rhode Island is clearly moving in that direction with regard to our proposal, and that's with regard to the proposed increased minimum size, and moving in that direction with regard to our proposed decreased bag, and moving in that direction with regard to our proposed shortened season. Indeed, by delaying the opening of our season to May 19th, Rhode Island would be more closely aligned, or would more closely align its season start date with all the states from New Jersey north. So the Rhode Island proposal is really a full Monty approach to more coastwide consistency. So in conclusion, Mr. Chair, thank you for this time. We're clearly spot on in terms of consistency with the approach set forth by the addendum, and by taking a more conservative approach with regard to projected harvest reductions, we're helping to strengthen the rationale for approval of the addendum by GARFO. And with that, I would pause and be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Any questions for Bob on the Rhode Island proposal?
Hey, Bob, this is Chris Bassavage. I just have two questions.
Go ahead,
Sure.
Chris.
The first one is, how many intercepts did Rhode Island have available to analyze this? Was it, in terms of number of intercepts that caught summer flounder? And second question, is there any concern about? I appreciate how this proposal is trading higher bag for a shorter season, but is there any concern with recoupment later in the year, since the season reduction occurs right at the very beginning when summer flounder are just kind of becoming available to the inshore recreational fishery? Thanks.
Well, thanks for the question, Chris. Let me answer the second one first, and then I have Jay Mack on the line remotely, and I think he may be able to help answer the first part. With regard to the and I think this is the essence of your question, and that is by taking the 18 days off of the beginning of May, what sort of impact does that have vis-a-vis Wave 3? As you know, the standard approach is to treat every day in a wave the same. That's the approach that was taken with regard to calculating the reduction. It is a significant reduction. We do get a good pulse of fish moving in the first 2 to 3 weeks of May, so we know for a fact that by keeping the fishery closed until May 18th, it will indeed involve meaningful reductions. I don't have the exact intercept data in front of me, but I did talk to Jason this morning about this issue, and I'm wondering, since I know he's on the line, whether he might be able to, and through you, Mr. Chair, if it's okay, see if Jason might be better able to answer the first part of Chris's question.
Sounds good, Jay. You got?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks for the question, Chris. So as you guys have been talking, I pulled the data. I'm a little uncomfortable because I wanted to double check that I counted correctly, but I have 142 intercepts for the month of May, so it's a pretty good sample size.
Chris, that sound all right?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Other questions for Bob or Jason McNamee on the Rhode Island proposal? All right, hearing none.
Wait a minute. This is Tom Foti again. When I looked at Massachusetts with the PSEs, I realized that they're much higher than us. We have a lot more confidence level in our numbers than they do in Massachusetts. I was wondering in Rhode Island, I thought the question was asked, what is the percentage of error? And I didn't hear an answer to that.
Yeah, sorry, Tom, I didn't hear that question.
I'm asking what the percentage of error is in your figures. I mean, I looked at Massachusetts, there was 40, and they're saying they're going to be 20 this year, which I hope they are, but I have concerns about that. But I know we're lower than that. I was wondering what Rhode Island's percentage of error is with their MREP data.
Yeah, I don't have that in front of me. I'm wondering if perhaps either Greg or Jason might know or have that.
Jason's fingers are moving pretty quick.
This is Rob. I've got it. Rob O'Reilly.
Rob,
I've got it for you. 22.5% in 2014 on the PSE, 24.9 in 2015, down to 19.3 in 2016. So fairly consistent. And when you look at all the states' PSEs, there are some that are lower, as Tom Foti has said, but also there are some that are higher.
Thank you, Rob. Great, thanks, Rob. Any other questions on the proposal? All right, hearing none. The next thing on the agenda is the technical committee report, and then we can, following Greg's report, we'll have time for questions, and then what I'll try to do is ask for a motion on one or both of these proposals, and then we'll focus discussion on the motion. So with that, Greg, are you comfortable giving your presentation now?
Sure, absolutely. I did prepare a presentation, which hopefully can get pulled up. With Kirby's help, of course. Okay, so thank you. So I'm going to be going over a conference call that the technical committee had. It was back on March 13th in reviewing the Massachusetts and the Rhode Island proposals for recreational management measures in 2017. So if we go to the presentation outline. So first, I'll do a brief review of the proposals we received from both Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and I'll try not to spend too much time on that. I realize we covered both the states just recently, and then I'm going to go through the technical committee discussions in the summary that we had over the phone, and after that, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Okay, so we have two proposals to consider. One from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the other from the state of Rhode Island. As for Massachusetts, their proposal is to increase their minimum size by 1 inch, as required by Addendum 28, but remain status quo on their possession limit from last year. So they would stay at 5 fish instead of decreasing to 4. This really is based primarily on the MREP intercept data that we saw in 2016. It indicated that there were no recreational trips with anglers keeping 5 fish, as we had previously discussed. So there was there were 72 anglers intercepted harvesting summer flounder, and none of them had filled their creel limit of 5 fish, with those 2 exceptions. So, however, their 1 inch size increase alone does account for the needed 31% reduction. And this is regardless of the creel limit being at 4 fish or 5 fish. As for Rhode Island, their proposal offers measures that are more conservative on paper than those in Addendum 28. So between the size limit increase and the 18-day later start date, it's expected they will achieve a higher reduction than the needed 34%. Instead, as said, it was expected to be around 38%. So Rhode Island is proposing to reduce their creel limit from 8 to 6 And similar to Massachusetts, this 2-fish reduction creel limit doesn't have a measurable reduction associated with it, but the lack of the reduction is made up by their reducing the season length. Okay, next slide. So the TC was in agreement that both proposals did use the standard methodology for calculating reductions. This is the same methodology that we've been using for at least the last 6 years, I think longer actually. The interaction formula was applied. The sample sizes were not terrible, and they did use the most recent year's data. The group didn't find any issues with any of the technical analysis that had been performed or the data that was used. In considering the proposal's impact to the coast-wide harvest, the TC were in agreement that neither states contribute a significant amount of harvest to the coast-wide harvest. So Rhode Island accounts for about 4.4%, and Massachusetts about 2.7% last year. They did point out that MRIP harvest estimates are variable from year to year, even under the consistent measures we had from 2014 to 2016. So Rhode Island accounted for anywhere between 4.5% to 12.7% within that time frame, with an average of 8.6. Massachusetts harvest accounts for about 2 or 3% of the coastwide harvest over the last few years. And next slide. There was some disagreement among the TC members on whether or not approving these proposals would contradict points raised previously by the TC. We have been considering moving away from using the standard methodology. In previous discussions, we had felt that the variability from one year to the next in MRIP harvest estimates could be problematic. This has led to some concerns that the current methodology was not really all that effective at developing the management measures. That said, it was also pointed out that our standard methodology was used to develop the harvest reduction for option 5 in addendum 28. And as you remember, that was the approved option for 2017. It was also noted that on the call, in both a prior TC memo and in a presentation to the board, that uniform increases in size limits and more uniform reductions in creel limits would have a greater chance of achieving a 30% reduction, and that's compared to the other options achieving a 40% reduction. Next slide. So the group also discussed briefly that the overall change in the management measures for all states will likely increase discards while reducing harvest. This is mostly due to that 1-inch increase that all states are seeing. Both proposals did point out, and the TC agreed, that increases in the size limit will have a greater impact in reducing harvest compared to limited possession limits. And lastly, it was noted that the TC does continue to acknowledge that management measures using conservation equivalency are important to the states. This allows them to adapt to any regional differences in the resource or any individual needs seen by the regions along the coast. And then the next slide. So while we did have discussion on moving away from the current methodology, there just isn't an alternative method at this point. The TC is still interested in trying to pursue a new approach. Hopefully it will be one that accounts for the limitations that we've been seeing with the MRIP data, but we just haven't had the time yet to develop anything. One possibility that we came up with is to have a workshop. Hopefully we would include the technical committee, the monitoring committee, and participants from MRIP. The main idea would be to have MRIP staff better define the calculations that go into the estimates of recreational harvest. This could also be an opportunity for the same group to begin developing new methods for further harvest estimation. Okay, so, and finally here, let's see. During the commission, staff noted that the annual process for conservation equivalency still requires a letter to be sent from the commission to NOAA outlining the approved management measures and that they don't exceed the RHL. If NOAA finds that the measures are not conservation equivalent to the coastwide measures, it's possible that NOAA could implement a set non-preferred coastwide measures that would apply to federal waters when they publish the final rule in the spring. So one correction to the TC memo, as they had stated, that it would apply to both state and federal waters, and that was not the case. Just wanted to point that out. And then that's it. So if there's any other questions, glad to take them.
Thanks, Greg. Any questions?
Yeah, Bob, it's David.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, if I could, I think I just need to confirm what was said in that presentation. I believe it was said that for Massachusetts, by going up that 1 inch on minimum size limit, you do get, just by that, the minus 31%, the 31% reduction rate that is required through Addendum 28. That's a point I made in my presentation. I just wanted to make sure that I heard that correct.
Right. We did use, as I had pointed out earlier to Rob, we did use the same data, in calculating the state measures, and all of it was in the size limit for Massachusetts, and going from 5 to 4 didn't add to the reduction.
Any other questions for the technical committee?
Yeah, this is Tom
Yes.
Cody. Basically, if you looked at any of the states and you look at the bag limit from going from 5 to 4, does it really make any difference in any state? Because there's so few opportunities to catch the bag limit. When I've looked at these statistics over the years, that it doesn't really make any difference. The only basically difference is the size of the lab. So why do we pick 4 fish over 5 fish?
So, yeah, that's true. When just about any state, when you have these higher creel limits, and you don't take significant cuts on them, there really is very little reduction associated with them, compared to reductions in the season and the size. Usually, most of the states we see only 2 or 3%. So it's unusual that we're not seeing any reduction, but again, usually you don't see a whole lot.
That means probably if every state came in and asked for a difference of 4 to 5 fish, it probably wouldn't make any difference with any state.
Well, the region of Connecticut through New Jersey had to go to 3 fish in order to get that. It did sort of make a difference. It sort of pushed us over the edge to get to the mark that we wanted, that 31% reduction.
Thanks. Other questions for Greg?
May I have a comment, Bob? This is Rob O'Reilly.
Please.
Okay. It relates to the presentation and the idea that we've had the standard methodology in place for many, many years. And now there's an exploratory method that the technical committee has put forward, and it's under option 5. And Greg, I know you said that this doesn't mean the standard methodology has been thrown out with the bathwater, but I wondered if the technical committee, when they talked about these different approaches, did they look at the situation that when the stock has not been doing well and has been in decline, the plans that have come in under the standard methodology have been more successful than when you have an increase, for example. So from the years below 2008, there was about a 5 or 6 year period where the RHL was consistently exceeded to the point where the regional administrator of that time said, if you can't improve on this, you can count on coastwide measures next time around. Then, lo and behold, when we look for the last 5 or 6 years, 6 years leading up to 2013, they're underages. And again, a lot of those years there was stock rebuilding. So it might be something to look at if you go forward comparing different methodologies to compare the abundance at age of summer flounder, because clearly what I've seen today and what I read with Massachusetts and Rhode Island on the northern and southern ends, there's definitely where the declines are at this point. So, if that is something to throw into the discussion later, that's good. I want to take that opportunity to point out the sort of the heartburn that everyone's had over the years with the standard methodology, but we've never tried to tie it directly to the status of the stock in terms of abundance of age. Thanks a lot for the comment.
Thanks, Rob, and no shortage of heartburn in summer flounder management, that's for sure. Any other questions for Greg?
Bob, this is Mike.
Yeah, Mike.
Not sure it's exactly directed to Greg, but your staff and or Garfo's staff might be able to also help me in understanding it was the last bullet that Greg presented, and it had to do with, well, it's the last bullet in the summary document from the TC referring to the process from here moving forward, in that the annual process for conservation equivalency requires a letter that will be sent to NOAA explaining why the measures that are put in place by the states would achieve but not exceed the current year's RHL. I realize that there's a methodology that's applied, a standard methodology that's applied in looking, and maybe it's, well, I guess Greg mentioned that the TC was kind of split between the current application of option 5 within the states and its achievement of approximately a 30% rather than a 40% reduction if you did the calculations on paper. But the question that I have for the TC and or those individuals who might be working on that letter as we speak, what other elements or what other conditions of the option 5 analysis play a significant role in that justification to NOAA as to whether or not this upcoming year we will achieve our desired result, which is to not exceed the RHL? Is there something within the option itself, such as perhaps the bag limits, as being something that the TC is going to weigh heavily on, or Bob, your staff will weigh heavily on in that justification? I just want to understand, and I want the other board members to understand what's going to close the gap between the 30% that's calculated on paper and the 40% that Garfo is looking at in order to approve conservation equivalency this year.
Emily, do you want to comment on behalf of NOAA or Tony?
I can jump in now, and then Tony, feel free to follow up anywhere. But so I just want to clarify again that Garfo and NIMS overall, we're not approving conservation equivalency. Essentially, the Commission is doing it. I know this is just a reminder for everyone, but when they submit us a letter of the determination, we reviewed the recommendations and ensured it's consistent. Garfo, we don't do any additional analysis of the state measures or anything beyond what the technical committee provides. So obviously, if the conclusion from the technical committee's analysis or from the Commission's determination letter is that the measures achieve conservation equivalency, that's a slam dunk for us. We can approve it ultimately. If the technical committee's analysis doesn't clearly support that conservation equivalency is being met, obviously that makes it a bit difficult. To that end, and to what Mike is discussing, we've been working closely with Commission staff on the justification of option 5 as it was voted on in February. And from what I understand, everything that's been discussed is really hinging on option 5 having a consistently low bag limit across all states. So what Massachusetts and Rhode Island are proposing, and I appreciate the proposals, but they don't seem to be consistent with the justification, technical committee's argument for option 5 as it stands. So obviously we don't have a letter yet from the Commission, and I can't speculate on whether we will or not ultimately be in a position to agree with an approval of conservation equivalency. But that's where it stands right now.
Thanks, Emily. Tony?
Mike, I can tell you that I've largely been working on this letter with John Maniscalco, and John, you can fill in for me when I'm done, but the letter, several of the arguments hinge on this low bag limit, and that higher bag limits have the ability to see the volatility in the MRIP estimates. The higher your bag limit, the more potential for volatility in your estimates to have one big trip, and that extrapolate largely across and end up with a super high estimate in your state, or the potential for a large estimate in your state. We also do some discussions about availability of fish, as well as just the variability in the MRIP estimate across the board from year to year. And then we also talk about having as similar or consistent measures as possible to try to help reduce some of that variability that you see in the harvest. John, is there anything else you would want to add?
Hi, Tony. Thanks. So, I mean, one of the examples that we provided is, you know, a single intercept from New York that accounts for 6% of the coastwide harvest. So you have 3 anglers that limit out. Limits do happen. Sometimes they're captured by interceptors. Sometimes they're not. I think in any given year, any state can or cannot limit out or have limit, you know, intercepts. But so this single intercept accounts for 6% of the numbers on the coast. And it was they limited out, and then when those weights, those expansion factors are very high, it increases the volatility of estimates. We know that MRIP is both variable and volatile, and so one of the things that option 5 was trying to do was to limit that volatility. You know, and then other things that we covered is that instead of focusing on fine-tuning of measures, which is what we've done for many years, it was just to do broad strokes that apply everywhere along the coast, so that you know, so that hopefully harvest in all states would be somewhat moderated by, you know, larger size limits, lower bag limits, and that the harvest estimates may not be quite so volatile.
If I may interrupt for a second, this is David. You know, so the last 2 speakers said something very, very important, and it's something all of us have labored with for many years, and it's really coming to a head now, and the technical committee is spotlighting it, which is great. MRIP has serious shortcomings. MRIP is very volatile. All it takes is one bad sampling, so to speak, in any particular state, and a small sample is extrapolated up to a tremendous amount of harvest by the recreational fishery. That just provides, again, more justification for ASMFC, and I would hope the councils dealing with MRIP information in a different way specific to the recreational harvest limits, so we're not always whipsawed and we're not always held hostage to an MRIP with serious shortcomings and the volatility that results.
Great, thank you.
I have to stay on that matter for this moment.
Thanks, David.
Yes, yeah, I have a question, Bob.
Go ahead, Rob.
Bob O'Reilly, and I didn't know John was on the call, so I think it's important to know whether what we're seeing with this information from Rhode Island and Massachusetts and what's happening at the southern end, which if it's not called juvenescence, I don't know what you call it, at the tails of the distribution, that really what impact beyond the percentages we heard. We heard some percentages that Rhode Island was as much as 4.4%, Massachusetts 2.2%. But I mean, when you look at the overall situation, it's clear that there are certain states to the north and south that had been in decline ever since we started this regional management. So the methodology that is part of option 5, really, I remember John saying before that the region that's going to be important is the one that John is in. That's going to be important to carry the day here. And the other thing is the stock is in decline in these areas, and probably overall, as we know, that's why we're here today, and that's why I've been going through a lot of heartburn again for a few years. So it's a little bit unusual, as I said at the Council ASMFC meeting, to look at hypotheses of what might save the day in 2017, knowing that we really don't always get that kind of an outcome anyway. So I think we need to look at the stock dynamics right now as well, and I'm suggesting that to Garfo, that really we need to look at the last few years, look at 2016 in particular, where the high harvest was, and look at the situation of what option 5 does more so through the center of the now distribution of summer flounder.
So if I could just add one more thing, this is John Maniscalco again. You know, a large amount of data fed into the stock assessment. You know, you have various, you know, sources of catch, and you also have many indices. And the vast majority of indices are showing stock declines. And the one indice that does not track that decline is MRIP. So I think it's important to remember the distinction that has to be made between actual harvest and the harvest estimates, which under the same, you know, same exact measures year to year vary by as much as 50% on the coast. So it's just not that accurate, just not that tight. It fails to account for all the other signals that are being seen in just about every other data set that contributed to the assessment.
Well, from a layman's perspective, John, pardon me, Bob, I'll be a layman here, but it would seem that if everyone's fussing over MRIP, that, and the technical committee's on this, and the technical committee today is a very good technical committee, maybe there are an index approach to MRIP itself where you will understand that there are certain conditions where you say, yes, at least that's the right amount of sampling for what's going on, and use that to do your own extrapolations at the ASMSC, quite frankly, because, you know, we're really getting into trouble here hearing about all these extrapolations that are undertaken. My personal one was 2013 when a father and son were, you know, intercepted, and somehow we had 95,000 fish in wave 2, which is not even an active wave in Virginia. So I agree completely with the MRIP situation. I'm not bashing it. I'm just saying we need to find a way to utilize MRIP in the right manner so that it'll be a correct index as we go forward. And maybe that's possible.
Bob, this is Mike. If I can just very, very quickly, I know we're getting short on time.
Yeah, go ahead.
Follow up on my original question regarding the additional elements within the letter that we believe to be those for which will help restrain harvest. If I could just ask the question regarding that letter, given what the comments that made kind of point us towards the bag limits as being one element of that. If the board ultimately decides to approve these two proposals, and does it complicate how we go forward to GARFO, given that the two states that are requesting the change are modifying what was, I guess, the baseline intent of option 5? Is it more challenging for staff to make an argument that we're still going to be in the position to achieve next year's RHL or not exceed next year's RHL?
But I'll ask Tony to comment on that, Mike, if she's willing to give it a shot.
I mean, ultimately, in the letter, I basically say that, you know, part of the non-quantifiable information is these low bag limits. And that's my big argument on the non-quantifiable part, is that, and the reduction in that. So if we have two states that don't have low bag limits or have different bag limits, I either have to take that out completely, or I just say for some states this may not be as much of a reduction as others because they have higher bag limits.
Okay, thank you, Tony.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, any other questions for the technical committee before we start getting into making decisions? All right, hearing none. Since we're on a conference call, motions and voting is always a little bit unique. We'll go ahead and take motions in a moment. The more I think about it, it seems it would be easier to take these as different in two separate motions rather than try to complicate the discussion with two different states in one motion. So we'll do that in a minute. When we get to voting, we'll pause for a few minutes, and if folks need to talk as a caucus and they want to use the conference line we're on and let the public hear their caucus, that's fine. If they want to email or text or however you guys want to get your heads together on a state vote, we have to collectively do that during the bit of a caucus that we have. And then all the votes are going to have to be roll call, just so we can record the votes, and there's no other way to do it really on a conference call. So before we get into the motions, I think there's a procedural issue that we need to talk about briefly, which is do we need a simple majority or a 2/3 majority vote on the different proposals that are in front of us? The Rhode Island proposal, it was stated clearly as a conservation equivalency proposal, and conservation equivalency proposals in the ASMFC process only require a simple majority vote, and if approved by a simple majority of the board, then the state's allowed to go ahead and implement those measures. The Massachusetts proposal wasn't exactly characterized as conservation equivalency. It was more of a seeking to change the provisions of Addendum 28 and modify the bag limit from 4 fish to 5 fish. So, unless I misinterpreted that, David.
I think you are, Bob. I consider it to be conservationally equivalent. They're equivalent, especially in the context of what was said by the technical committee representative, that we get the necessary 31% reduction just with the increase in the minimum size. The bag limit really doesn't factor into this. It's equivalent.
All right. Then without objection from the board, we'll move forward with the procedure that both of these proposals are conservation equivalency, and they'll take a simple majority vote to be approved. Does anyone have a concern with that approach?
Bob, Adam Nowalski, I think we just have to be very clear on the record. We have an addendum that said we were going to 4 fish across the board. We have press releases from the commission that state the intent of the addendum was to go to 4 fish across the board. And now we're considering proposals that go to something other than what was in the addendum. So I think you've got to be very clear, if you're going to go that route, why this is not overturning that previous vote by the board to select an option that mandated all states have a 4 fish bag limit. Because it's my understanding that's what the addendum called for, and that was what we had all voted on previously.
All right, that's good perspective, Adam. Thank you.
And this is Tom Fody. I wasn't at the meeting in February, but I know what was basically said and what was done, and I'm in perfect agreement with Adam. This is a lot different from most motions we made on addendum plans. This demanded everybody go to the same bag limit as part of the whole enterprise. So I think this requires a 2/3 vote.
Well, obviously I disagree for the reasons that I've stated.
Yeah, this is Bob. I also disagree. I mean, this is about conservation equivalency. I mean, in striped bass, 1 fish at 28 is the standard, but states are certainly, the door is open to propose something different. So just because that's the measure adopted in the FMP, it's only bearing on the state to the extent that they have to abide by that or something else conservationally equivalent. So I don't understand why we would be looking at this in any other way. So I would support the notion that this is a straight up and down vote, or should be, on 2 states seeking approval for conservationally equivalent programs.
Unlike striped bass, where we have to basically just deal with the commission, we are dealing with the Mid-Atlantic Council and National Marine Fisheries Service, because we can make our own decisions between ourselves. But we now have to get the approval of the National Marine Fisheries Service on whether this is what we're saying it is, and Tony is putting together the letter. And that makes this a big difference in striped bass.
Well, Tom, one way to look at that might be, and I'm not choosing sides here, is you know, the ASMFC procedures allow states to vary things in our FMPs and addenda and amendments. And, you know, if your state, excuse me, if your state's concerned that this, given that there's this interaction and interplay between ASMFC, Mid-Atlantic, and New England, I mean, and NOAA fisheries, then, you know, your state can reflect that in their vote maybe. But I think procedurally, you know, what Rhode Island has proposed in Massachusetts is not inconsistent with the conservation equivalency guidelines that ASMFC has approved. That may be one way to look at it. Pardon me?
I'll accept the ruling of the chair.
Okay. So with that, let's go. We'll go ahead. And is there anyone ready to make a motion on the Massachusetts proposal? We'll start with that one.
Yeah, I'll make a motion, Bob. I would move that the board approve Massachusetts 2017 proposal for summer flounder recreational fishery, 17 inches minimum size, 5 fish possession limit, and the 125-day season from May 22nd through September 23rd.
I'll second that. This is Bob from Rhode Island.
Bob Ballou seconded that. All right. Kirby is writing feverishly to get that motion recorded. Is there any discussion on the motion to approve the Massachusetts proposal as presented today?
Bob, this is Tom Foti, and I'm not in the same room as of Adam and Tom, so I'll basically give my position so they understand that they can vote whatever way they feel like between the two of them. Basically, I have concerns here. I mean, Massachusetts and Rhode Island kept talking about regions, except they're not in regions, basically because in 2014, after we voted on one addendum, an amendment to basically allow regionalization, at the following conference call meeting, just like this one, we allowed them to pull out. We didn't allow New Jersey to pull out and do the same thing they did. We are now sitting here in 2017, again, after you put an addendum that we did not vote for in New Jersey and support, you are now looking for 2 states to be allowed to do their own separate thing, the same 2 states, and New Jersey is not. We're back in a region with New York and Connecticut. So I have real concerns here, so I cannot support either one of the motions.
Thanks, Tom. Other comments?
This is a comment about the Massachusetts proposal. This is Rob O'Reilly, and this is just something that came up earlier, and I don't think we had the information on it. I know that John Clark from Delaware had some good questions on the non-compliance, or the poaching, as David termed it, and I guess the idea is I never understood whether those were A fish or whether those were B1 fish. Was that just something that was said about B1 fish that certainly is less reliable than A fish that are looked at and measured? And then the other thing about non-compliance is it's always been there, so I think if we looked across the board, we would find states that had some breaches of minimum size, some breaches of the possession limit along the line, but we didn't do that. And, you know, it would have been helpful to me to know the disposition of those intercepts, whether they were just fish that were said, yeah, I've got, you know, this many fish in my cooler, and some misunderstanding compared to looked at. Back in time, if you go back in time, the non-compliance was used. When Chris Moore used to coordinate with the council, non-compliance actually was used as part of judging proposals forward, and, you know, it wasn't as of 2001 on. So I have that lingering question, but I wanted to also indicate that you'll find non-compliance if you look into the data for other states as well. It's always been there.
Other comments on the motion?
Hi, it's Matt from Connecticut. How we doing?
Good.
This proposal kind of appears on paper to be equivalent. You know, simply adding 1 fish to the creel limit and sort of in effect asking us to accept that 4 is equal to 5. And without having any other component to it that would help mitigate the risk, however small that risk is. having that higher creel limit. And I fear that would make it harder for us to write a letter to Garfo, kind of with a straight face, saying that those things are equivalent, and hard for us to get an approval for Addendum 28 from Garfo.
If I may respond to that, Matt, I think we can and we will write a letter collectively to Garfo, and it will be with a very straight face, because we can reflect on technical committee reviews, conclusions, and I'll just highlight again that dropping from 5 to 4 gains us nothing. It's the increase in the minimum size that gets us what we need, that 31%. So I'll leave it at that.
Bob, this is Mike.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
So I'm going to make a comment, and I guess my comment's expecting that we're going to have another motion here in a few minutes from Rhode Island. We're going to be along the same line. And so let me first say, for the purpose of understanding the position that I've taken many, many times over the years, I fully support and have always been and always will be a supporter of the idea of conservation equivalency. Conservation equivalency is the thing that it's something that the Commission does right. It gives the states the ability to make modifications to regulations to achieve what it is their stakeholders are truly desiring. And I always will continue to support that moving forward. But I don't see what we're talking about right now as true conservation equivalency. And let me try to clarify. When we had the debate in February over which option to select, the board decided to select option 5, and option 5 had some concerns with it, and it had some risk that came with it. The concern was that in the justification of the recreational measures in option 5, that we weren't necessarily reaching our full potential of harvest reduction, and that we were coming in short. And so we were going to make a case, as was stated earlier, that there are other conditions to option 5 and the recreational measures that correspond with option 5 that will strengthen the argument that we would make to Garfo regarding whether or not the states are conforming to conservation equivalency, so we can move forward with our rulemaking and establishing our seasons for this year. And so the way I saw option 5 as it was presented and discussed is not necessarily state-specific. It's not state-specific in that each state is trying to achieve a 31% reduction. I viewed option 5 as a package, the entire package as it was delivered, with the justification that was made by the technical committee that's being worked on currently by Commission staff in making a case that if we all do what option 5 suggested, increasing minimum sizes by 1 inch and not having gag limits greater than 4 fish, that we will achieve, at the end of the day, our ultimate goal, which is not to exceed the RHL. The point about volatility when bag limits increase gives me some pause as to how both proposals that were presented today would create some messiness within our letter or our justification for conservation equivalency to Garfo. And so I can't support either of the proposals today. And the reason is that I just don't think the added risk of failure in this case, of not presenting a plan to Garfo that is approvable under conservation equivalency, the reward is not worth the added risk. And that added risk, in my opinion, is a non-preferred coast-wide alternative of a 19-inch fish with a June 1st to September 15th season in federal waters. That's a very considerable difference from what we currently would have in our state waters, and we do have an awful lot of landings that come from federal waters. It's a minus 258 days from the current season that we have. And while I don't believe that either of the proposals increase the risk independently of overachieving the RHL, I think that it goes against the grain of option 5 as it was discussed, and I will not be able to support either proposal today. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Other comments on the motion to approve Massachusetts proposal?
Yeah, Bob, it's Jim Gilmore. I've been awake this whole time.
Hey, Jim.
Just a couple of comments. I think, and you know, along with what Mike said, and both David and Bob's proposals, I think, are very good. I mean, they essentially, and I agree 100% that they follow the ASMFC standard for conservation equivalency, and typically what we do. And you know, if that's all we were talking about, I think it might be, you know, I'd have more support for this. But what the problem is that, you know, for this year with summer flounder, I mean, it is very atypical in what we've done. And when option 5 was put together, it really looked at, you know, what's been said several times, a quantitative approach for that 31, and then a qualitative, you know, part, which again was the bag reduction. So, and that challenge is because of the issues with the, you know, the confidence we had in MRIP. So that leap of faith I think we're trying to take for that extra 10%. Was really because of the MRIP estimates. So now if you look at the proposals that both Mass and Rhode Island put in, we're kind of using MRIP now to make an argument that, well, we should be able to do conservation equivalency. So it's kind of like you can't have it both ways. We can't say there's a problem with MRIP and then use it to justify changing those numbers. So, and my biggest concern with this, again, you know, if it wasn't for the uniqueness of Fluke this year, I might be able to support it, but the fact that, you know, Garfo really has to approve this, and we're having a difficult time, just as option 5 is right now, that anything that's going to vary from that is going to erode our arguments, I think, and which concerns me quite a bit, because I think we need to, you know, stick with what we decided in February, and hopefully that this will give everybody at least some productive season for 2017 until we can come up with a better approach. Anyway, thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Other comments?
I have to say that I really like the Rhode Island proposal. I told Bob that. I didn't get a chance to talk to David. I think that proposal in most circumstances would be very viable with the information presented. I think it's a shame that we don't know since February 15th till now exactly what Garfo's doing, and I understand they have a lot to do and a lot to think about, and I do think that these proposals are all about timing. So in normal circumstances, with a lot of the conservation equivalency, and striped bass was mentioned earlier, it's always better once there's a plan in place, then there can be a technical committee review and a board review of conservation equivalent proposals. Here we have a situation where we don't have a plan approved, and so there is a lot of added risk. I mean, it's different this time around. When I was at the joint meeting, I did think that, well, we've got something going here that's pretty good. Frankly, I liked option 1, but that's okay. I'm in a region, and the region didn't like option 1 altogether. So option 5 made sense to me as well. It still does. The size limit carries a lot of weight. I think despite liking the Rhode Island proposal, and I'm not taking away from your proposal, David, I think the timing is really hurting everything. And, you know, let's wait and see what I think I did hear from Emily. And she's really on the spot when she had to talk about it, but I think, and Tony too, and I think the consensus is that, you know, it's going to muck things up. I think Mike kind of talked about that very well and stated it very well, so lean against the Massachusetts proposal and the Rhode Island proposal as well, with reluctance, because it's all about timing. You know, it's all about the situation we find ourselves in. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Other comments? All right. Seems like everyone has spoken their piece. So with that, this is a vote. I'm gonna actually let's take about a couple minutes to caucus. You guys can, as I said, if anyone needs to talk sort of out loud on this conference line, feel free to do so, or emails or whatever, and we'll 90 seconds or so, then we'll get ready to vote. All right, I don't hear a whole lot of conversation. Does anyone else need any extra time for caucusing?
Nope.
All right, we'll go with that then. So with that, Kirby, I'll ask you to go through the roll call vote on the Massachusetts proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Starting north to south, Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Yes.
Rhode Island.
Yes.
Connecticut.
No.
New York.
No.
New Jersey.
No.
Delaware.
No.
Maryland.
No.
Potomac River Fisheries Commission.
No.
Commonwealth of Virginia.
No.
North Carolina.
No.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is not present. National Marine Fisheries Service.
We'll be abstaining. Obviously, we've voiced some concerns, but we'll wait until we get the final letter from the commission.
All right, thank you. There are 2 votes in favor, 8 votes in opposition, and 1 abstention, so that motion does not carry. Moving forward to the Rhode Island proposal. Is there a motion on the Rhode Island proposal?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is Bob Ballou. I'd like to make a motion.
Go ahead,
and
please.
that motion would be to move that the board approve the Rhode Island Conservation Equivalency Proposal for summer flounder recreational management measures for 2017 of 19 inches minimum size, 6 fish possession limit, and 227-day season, May 19 through December 31. And if I get a second, I would like to speak to it.
I'll
Thank you.
second that.
That's David Pierce seconding the motion, and the floor is yours, Bob.
Thank you. And, I think there is a difference. Now is the time to say it, I think, between and it's been noted by others, so now this is Rhode Island speaking about the difference as we perceive it between the Mass and Rhode Island proposals. We deeply respect Massachusetts' efforts to move forward, and we also respect the very sound opinions and thoughts that have been offered by other board members in terms of the potential risk associated with approving either or both of these proposals. Our view is that the Rhode Island proposal does not add to that risk at all. In fact, it actually strengthens the Commission's hands. The reason, of course, being that we are making essentially a trade-off. We are reducing our bag. We are not looking to maintain the same bag, so we are moving with a bag reduction proposal. And in contrast to every other state, because the addendum does not call for this, we're reducing our season in a very meaningful way. So it just strikes me that the upshot here is that if the board were to see fit to approve what we believe is a very strong conservation equivalency proposal, the result would be that under the addendum as submitted to GARFO, all states, that is everyone except North Carolina, would be increasing their minimum size by 1 inch. So there's an across-the-board conservation measure there, all states moving in that direction. Most states, that is everyone except Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, and North Carolina, will be reducing their bag. So, yes, Rhode Island is proposing to reduce its bag. And then one state, and that would be Rhode Island, is further proposing to reduce its season. So it sweetens the situation in the sense of, and we could not agree more, the importance of trying to put our best foot forward regarding the pending approval by GARFO of the addendum, i.e. option 5. We think, imagine if every state or region proposed a reduction in their season as a way to further strengthen the hand. We think we're offering a meaningful, we know we're offering a meaningful additional conservation benefit, and we can't, in our wildest dreams, imagine how that could be viewed as hurting the cause, meaning it should well work for Tony and Greg and John and their efforts to put together the letter, because there is not necessarily an across the board, because not every state is lowering their bag, but certainly there is a lowering of the bag. Given the vote just taken, it looks like Massachusetts would be lowering, Rhode Island would be lowering, and really every state except for the ones mentioned would be lowering their bag. So I think it's that ER at the end of low that I want to focus on here. Tony mentioned low bag as being the standard that the Commission wants to draw upon. We get that, and we're right there with a proposed lowering of the bag. So across the board, with regard to every measure, size, season, and bag, Rhode Island is proposing to adjust and be more conservative. So I want to note that difference between the two proposals and make it clear, as I did in my opening remarks, that we are offering this in good faith with a view to strengthening the rationale to be presented to GARFO for approval of the addendum. Thank you for that opportunity, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. Other comments on the Rhode Island proposal or the motion before the board?
Yeah, hi, this is Matt from Connecticut again.
Go ahead.
So this proposal, as I see it, it's trading fish reel for season. And in general, I kind of feel that reducing the season is probably a little bit more effective than reducing the creel limit, especially when these creel limits we're talking about are a lot higher than people are really usually catching. That said, I do wish that we could get closer together on all our rules along the coast, like Mike was talking about. And it's going to be painful, I guess, quite frankly, for me to be justifying to our fishermen how our neighbor to the east can have a 6-fish limit and we could have just a 3-fish limit. But I guess it doesn't really matter how much I really don't like that. I can't really reject it outright because I feel like Rhode Island is making an effort to account for their increased creel limit by lengthening or shortening their season a little bit. And I don't think it'll really make it too much harder to justify to GARFO. So I guess that's where I am.
Thanks, Matt. Other comments?
Hey, Bob, this is Chris Batsavage. I share Rob O'Reilly's sentiments that he stated earlier. I think we're kind of falling victim to bad timing and a unique situation that Addendum 28 has compared to past actions we've taken as far as kind of being very clear as far as capping the bag limit at 4 fish. Rhode Island has definitely put forward otherwise a solid proposal to trade off season for bag limit. But I think with the uncertainty as far as how GARFO is going to view this and how we're going to write the justification letter as it stands, just from my perspective, we can't risk having coastwide measures in federal waters while we have different measures in state waters. It's an enforcement nightmare, and it just kind of adds more confusion than I think we need, which then would probably just exacerbate the compliance issues. I think all of us have seen in recent years with summer flounder. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Other comments?
Bob, this is Mike. You know, Bob Ballou, you know me well enough to know that decisions that we make sometimes often pain me. And this is one of them, because I think your team put together an excellent proposal, as did Massachusetts. But I'm faced with trying, you know, in my mind, being consistent across the board with the qualitative aspect of what the justification would be for states to achieve conservation equivalency in the eyes of GARFO this year. And if any other option was selected by the board, which would have achieved quantitatively that 41% reduction that was needed, I would be the first to support an effort to modify your seasons to add bag limit. You know, I wouldn't hesitate. However, that qualitative element and just the timing of it all, I think, is what I need to stand by at this point still. And you and I have talked about this in the leading up to this meeting. But so I do truly, I can feel the pain here. I realize your state's interest. This is not an easy decision to make, but again, as I mentioned before, I'm not going to be able to support your proposal. Thanks.
Thanks.
Rob O'Reilly, I don't want to be redundant. I don't want to be redundant here, but I really like this proposal, and I did talk to Bob, and you know, it is a situation where Rhode Island worked really hard on this, and it's kind of a situation that in any other time, I really would see this as one of the better proposals, and I've looked at a lot of proposals over the years under the what's now called the standard methodology, perhaps. So I just want you to know that, Bob, and I told you it was really good, and I think one thing you said to me was if there's an impediment here as far as us going forward with where we were with option 5, that there really shouldn't be. But I think after the call has progressed, I do see that impediment, and I certainly do see that we are all in one package now, and that was the basis for option 5. And so, you know, reluctantly, I do have to tell you that I won't be supporting your proposal.
This is Bob. Nothing personal, of course, and I very much appreciate everyone's comments and thoughtful consideration of the proposal. Thank you.
All right, with that, is there any other comments, or are the states ready to caucus?
Caucus.
Caucus, all right. Well, it seemed like it went pretty quick last time, and the states probably know where they are, so let's give it 30 seconds or so, and then we'll vote or see if everybody's done caucusing. All right, that's 30 seconds. Does anyone need longer to caucus? I don't want to cut anything off if people are still chatting. I guess not. Therefore, I will ask Kirby to call the roll call vote for the Rhode Island proposal. Kirby?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll start going north to south, Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Yes.
Rhode Island.
Yes.
Connecticut.
Yes.
New York.
No.
New Jersey.
No.
Delaware.
No.
That was an NULL?
No, yes, NULL.
Making sure. Thank you.
Maryland.
No.
Potomac River Fisheries Commission.
No.
Virginia.
No.
North Carolina.
No.
National Marine Fisheries Service.
Abstain.
So I think we have 3 votes in favor, 6 in opposition, 1 null vote, and 1 abstention. Therefore, the motion does not carry. Anything else to come before the Summer Flounder Scup Black Sea Bass Management Board today?
Yes, Bob. Curious, have we had any discussion about scheduling the next board conference call or meeting on Black Sea Bass?
Kirby started the polling for that, I believe, for the last week of April.
Yeah, I recall that. Just to highlight, I'm not going to be around that week, so hopefully, in the interest of Massachusetts perspective, we can shoot for a date when I am available.
And Dr. Pierce, you're out the 21st through the 28th?
Yes, I'm out of the country. Yep.
All right, we'll take that into consideration and work with Mike Luisi as the actual board chair and see what dates we can come up with. I think part of that board call or the timing of that is contingent on the final MRIP numbers for 2016 coming out. So go and the normal schedule for that would be April 15th. So going much earlier, there may be some risk in the fact that the final numbers are not out. So we'll have to think that one through a little bit, but we can do that.
I'd appreciate any consideration. Thank you, Bob.
Fair enough. Sounds good. Anything else from the board before we end the call? We're a little bit long.
Good
Mike,
job.
do you have anything as the chair?
No, Bob, just to say that you recovered very nicely after the beginning there. When I'm just joking with you. But no, listen, thanks for everybody who's patient.
We would have done a lot earlier if I didn't have to go back to number 2 and 3.
Hey, Bob.
Yeah.
This is Roy. On February 1st, Rich Wong sent a memo recommending that we examine the concept of using F-targets instead of what we're presently doing for summer flounder. I was wondering if we could request some technical committee review of that particular memo.
That's up to the board. We can do it 2 ways. We can just say, have a tasking from the board right now, or we can circulate that memo and then see if the board would like to task the TC at a later date.
Well, the memo made sense to me because I think it may get us out from under some of this annual wrangling over MRIP estimates. So from that standpoint alone, I think it's worth considering. Anyway, personal opinion.
Yeah, and Roy, let me add to that. So the Mid-Atlantic Council is also considering funding some work, taking a look at F-targets, F-based management system for summer flounder and black sea bass. Also, it might be good for you to send that proposal along through the TC. I support that, and we can coordinate some efforts with the council as well.
Apparently, Rich did distribute it to the other members of the TC and to the board as well.
Okay.
At least a February 1st memo from Rich.
Yeah, Roy, I think one of the other things that needs to be one dimension of this review is the flexibility that the Mid-Atlantic Council and GARFO have. Can they adopt an F-based approach versus the recreational harvest limit approach that we have now? But I think that's all part and parcel of the same, of a review of the overall idea.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, all right, we can try to find some TC time to work on that.
Okay, that'd be good.
Before the board. All right, hearing none, I'll move quickly so we don't keep chatting. So thank you all. This will be, we'll adjourn the Summer Flounder Scup Black Sea Bass Management Board, and we'll, keep an eye on your emails for follow-ups from Kirby on the next call to potentially discuss Black Sea Bass. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.